Welcome to Sales Enabled, the podcast for salespeople, sales leaders, and sales enablers everywhere who are committed to making the sales profession better for everyone involved. Hello and welcome to Sales Enabled, the podcast where we're going to be sharing ideas that are going to help improve the world of sales, sales experience, sales training, and really the buying experience as we go on this journey. Welcome to podcast episode 1, where I'm really just going to introduce to you the concept and what we're going to try and achieve on this, as well as give you a little bit of experience that I've had over the years. I guess what I wanted to start to do is ask you a question, and that is, what impact does something that somebody said 15 years ago have on you? Now, I recently bumped into one of my very first sales training students after speaking at an event at London's Excel Arena. The guy's name was Tom, and we both aged fairly significantly since we'd last seen each other in the training room. We spent a few minutes chatting, catching up, you know how it is, going over the early days and then really how our careers have progressed. And then Tom said to me something that made me think. He said, "I still remember some of those things you taught us on the course." I was like, okay, yeah, well, what bits would that be? Kind of as if to call him out for being polite, but also genuinely interested in understanding what really landed back there. You know, this is back in the early days of my training career. I've learned a few bits and pieces since then. I've come a long way, but still we shared some really good ideas, and some of the concepts that we shared, I've pulled with me into my trainings today. So as Tom shared a couple of those ideas, a couple of things really happened. First, it was amazing just to kind of go back on that journey and to think about all those things that we used to do. We started to remember names, content, just the people that we spent, generally good times I had in those early days of training, and I still do. That was back when I was training graduate sales recruits moving into an IT sales role. I guess secondly, it made me realize that sharing information can be life-changing. When you've been in sales training for as long as I have, it's not uncommon to bump into ex-students from time to time. Many of my students have gone on to have amazing sales careers. I'm proud to say that in my alumni, if you can call it that, I can include CROs of global companies. I can include people who've gone on and created their own business, built their own business, and really sold businesses for multi-million-pound deals. I can even claim one of them was the winner of The Apprentice. All right. So many of those have gone on to be great friends. I even had a couple of ex-students come to my wedding. And I'm not going to try and take credit for their success. All of the work they did, they've earned everything that they've earned over the years. And when they came to my training room, they weren't those people, right? They were the essence of those people. But I would like to think that some of the ideas we shared, and that you guys and we all continue to share, go on to shape people's careers. So 15 years later, that information, those ideas that we share, even today, will shape the person you're going to become in 15 years. So that's the purpose behind the Sales Enabled podcast, right? The goal really is to do, I guess, 3 things. Right? First is to help make salespeople better at their job today. I've been in sales. I've been a salesperson. I've been in sales training for many years. And I've got to say, sales is always going to be one of the toughest jobs out there. We're constantly chasing numbers. We're always up against a monthly or quarterly deadline or something that we've got to work towards. And each month and each quarter, you then have to start again, right? You're just constantly chasing a number. So anything that we can do from a podcast perspective, from a sales training concept perspective, sales enablement, really, we should be focusing on making sales' life easier so they can continue to perform and really, hopefully, even out that little roller coaster that everybody goes on. So that's part number 1. Let's make salespeople better at the job today. Second part is, I guess, something that's coming up a little bit recently is really help keep the art of selling and persuasion alive as kind of technology raises its head and seeks to replace some of the work that salespeople are doing. Every day I'm getting reached out to with a new tech. New tech seems to be being released each and every single day. And, if we're not careful, we're going to lose this ability to persuade and influence people. So let's keep that art alive. Let's really make sure that, we're enhancing it with tech. We're not replacing it with tech. Okay, so really keen to keep sales and persuasion alive. That's where I started, right? Teaching people how to influence using neurolinguistic programming. And then I guess the third part is sales isn't going anywhere. So let's keep the sales and buying process for everyone involved going, but let's improve it. Let's improve it for everyone involved, whether you're on the sales side or the buying side. And until Amazon have figured out how to sell absolutely everything through the Amazon platform, we're still going to have buyers and sellers, right? We're always going to have buyers and sellers. So let's try and find a way we can do it. I've been a seller. I've been a buyer. As a salesperson, it's hard work. We're trying to add value. But as a buyer, sometimes you get frustrated. So let's try and find a way that we can, do that. So, buyers can ultimately make better decisions that are informed by salespeople, and salespeople can be proud to call themselves salespeople, right? So let's do that. That's the kind of goal with the podcast. So hopefully, as you kind of dive into the episodes, and each episode is going to be a little bit different. Mostly I'm hopefully going to be sharing ideas and interviewing people on this podcast. I'm going to have pretty cool guests, each of who is going to bring something a little bit unique and different to the show. Okay, just as we're the sales training, right? We're not trying to get one episode that's going to be the ultimate episode. Everything's going to bring a little bit something different. So, not everything's going to resonate with you. So I'm happy if you subscribe to every episode and we see you on every show, and be very happy to have you there. But I'll also be happy if you just jump in occasionally and, take the best bits for you and then go and apply them. In fact, actually, if you apply any of the ideas, I'll be happy or whatever. So just take it, pay it forward, go do what you want. For this episode, this is the first ever episode, and I don't have anyone else on the show. It's just me, and I wanted to share with you, I guess I wanted just to kind of do a quick recap of those 15 years and think about some of the crazier things I've said in my training over that time. And I'm really looking back at it makes me realize a couple of things. Is number one, I have come a long way, right? I still say there's tons to learn, but if you'd seen me back then, you realize that, geez, this guy's made some improvements, and that's saying something. All right. So number one, I've come a long way. So 15 years and plus and some change, I've learned some stuff. But actually, secondly, is looking back at that. Some of those things we said made a lot of sense and still do today. Right. There's a lot of elements of sales which are timeless. I don't think you can, there's some things that are never going to change. Yes, there's an evolution in sales. Yes, buyers want different things, but the concepts of sales still, many of them still ring true. So let's just jump into those. I'm going to give you a kind of few ideas, things that I've learned over the years. It's probably a bit of a rant. Apologies, bear with me. Hopefully it's going to be valuable. But it's really going to set the scene for kind of future episodes, hopefully. So I look forward to kind of seeing you on those as well. So first one. This is something I used to say at the beginning of every single training. So this is crazy, which is, I don't care if you guys remember this stuff. It's not my commission check you're paying. Right? Let me say that again. I don't care if you guys remember this stuff. It isn't my commission check you're paying. So literally started every sales training like that for a good couple of years. And obviously with that, right, sales are in charge of their own commission. If you learn something, you apply it, then I'll go and do it. And that was kind of what I wanted to imply, right, is that sales, you are the holders of your own destiny. You have the key in your hand, and you can go and take these ideas, apply them immediately. It will have a tangible impact on the quality of your life. So that definitely reigns true, but there's got to be a but. I remember saying this again, went to do one training, mention no names, but let's say it's in the north of England, somewhere around Middlesbrough somewhere. And I did this training and I said, look, I don't care if you guys remember this stuff. It's not my commission check you're paying. And literally a couple of days later, I was doing this as a kind of like a third party trainer, right? Going and train someone's content, put a little spin on it. Get a call from a promoter. They say, hey, Dan, is it true what you said? I'm like, I don't know. What did I say? And they said, well, he said, I don't care if you learn that stuff. I said, yeah, I said that. I said, because I'm still getting paid. Like, no. That's not what I said, right? So one thing I did learn is that communication is important, right? The words that come out of our mouth, in our head, we think they say something, but actually communication is not just about what is said, it's about what is received and how things are received. And you've got to keep that context in mind, right? In this situation, and again, like I said, I've learned a lot. I wasn't dealing with natural salespeople. I was dealing with people who were being asked to sell. And so the lesson in that is the meaning of communication is the response you get. And clearly, on that occasion, I got the wrong response. But hilarious, great way to start. Let's blame it on the arrogance of youth. I don't care if you guys remember this stuff. It's not my commission check you're paying. Moving on. I used to introduce boot camps. We'd spend 2 weeks with these new salespeople, right? And I said, this training will stop some of you smoking. Because it did, right? I had people come through the training, many of them stopped smoking. I said, it will, it will also cause some of you to start smoking, which it did, right? And something I guess I've learned over the years is state and energy management are essential for sales. Like I said, this is a roller coaster journey. If you're not able to balance and manage your state as you go through, you're going to be constantly subjected to the ups and downs of sales. So number one, learn how to balance your energy management. But the reason we stop people smoking, let me just kind of go back to that, is training. Right? And we'll talk about this model called neurological levels in another episode. But good training goes beyond just providing people with skills. If somebody can do something, doesn't mean that they will do something, right? So there's got to be something a little deeper than that. And that's the psychology. And we kind of go into that values and beliefs section where people start to think and believe certain things. And if you play in that area, you can create good change. But actually, if you go one level beyond that, there's this idea of identity. And getting people to shift their identity and their self-perception will cause massive waterfall changes below. And so good trainers, or great trainers rather, will not just play with the skills. They'll certainly deliver some skills work, but they'll also look at that identity, perception, beliefs, values, the whole mindset and attitude behind behavior. Okay, so that's good training. And I also realized that, culture plays a huge part. Culture plays a huge part. And, sales is a crucible where diamonds are formed, right? Literally the pressure, the heat of that engagement, you can create some amazing diamonds, but it can also be forgiving. So culture is so important. And what do I mean by culture? You've got to have an amazing leader. Been fortunate enough over the years to work with some amazing leaders that really kind of care for their people and at the same time hold them accountable for the numbers. It's a great balance to have. You want to have a supporting environment. You want to have people that are there really encouraging you to grow, and resource, like, training, enablement, that kind of thing, that are encouraging you to grow. And I've also seen that, that doesn't work for everyone in every context. And so a culture could work for one person, but a different culture could work for another. And I've seen salespeople who've struggled in one situation move to another and absolutely thrive. So keep this in mind, is the identity, the culture, that whole mindset piece is so important, as much, probably even more so, than the skill piece. So yeah, start smoking, stop smoking. I'd say I'm about even. Status quo is the biggest competitor of all. So this is point number 3. Status quo is the biggest competitor of all. I remember as we went through trainings, we used to spend a lot of time getting people to evaluate their competitors, right? So you're going to be working for company A, go and evaluate company B, C, D, figure out, the battle cards, what you're going to win, what they're going to lose, all those kind of things. And at the time, I didn't realize the impact of status quo. I didn't realize that the biggest battle was no change. Like I said, this is years ago. And since then, I've done a whole bunch of study on decision science, and status quo bias is a thing, right? It's a real thing. It's documented. And many buyers will kind of default to status quo if they're not challenged and pushed off of kind of just the perch, right? The comfort zone. We get into our comfort zone. We're like, okay, it's bad, but it's not that bad. All right. And the example I give is, if you're walking along the beach and you get sand in your shoe, what do? You're like, well, first of all, Dan, you shouldn't be walking on the beach with shoes on. Right? So I get that. I live in the middle of England, not very close to the beach. So, context. But everyone would say is like, well, you take your shoe off and you take the shoe off. And I say, no, that's not the right answer. But it is the right answer, but that's not what people do. What people do is they crinkle their toes up. And they try and kind of wiggle the sand so it gets between their toes. So it's bad, but it's not bad enough to take the shoe off, right? And this is the challenge, right? Status quo is the wrinkling of the toes to kind of deal with this kind of mini problem that we have, which is just a bit of sand in the shoe. What the job of sales is to do is to make that pain bigger. We have to extrapolate pain. This is why salespeople typically aren't liked, because you call a prospect, they had no pain. You call them introduce pain, salespeople equal pain, right? So this is why a good salesperson shouldn't necessarily be liked, okay? And this is the challenge for salespeople who have like a pathological need to be liked. They're never going to push a seller, or a buyer rather, to the point where they're uncomfortable, that they need to make a decision. They're going to let them off the hook sooner than they need to, and they're not going to generate that level of pain. So a really good salesperson will never leave anybody sat on the fence. This is my challenge to you. As a salesperson, you should never leave someone sat on the fence. If they make a no decision, that's a terrible sale. They should make a decision, whether it's to buy your product or not. It doesn't matter, All right. I mean, in theory, it does your salesperson get them to buy it. But what you want them to do is make a decision, make them fall off the fence either side. Your job as a seller is then to educate them why they should fall your way and not the other way. All right. So status quo bias. If you're not sure what that is, go and study it. Go and study the heck out of it. I guarantee you've been up against it in all of your deals. But it's a real thing. We'll spend a whole bunch of time understanding how do we get past status quo. There's a way we can do it. Okay, a couple more. Scripts. Let's talk about scripts. Scripts are terrible. Scripts are bad, but plays are awesome. Okay, and I'll give you a context, like my background. If think about sport, I played American football, played at a fairly high level. And in American football, you have a series of plays, right? You have a play for this scenario, play for this scenario. Okay, you don't script the entire game. You maybe script the first 3, 4, 5 plays of a game, and then you got to react. I had to once, there was a company I worked with, they wanted me to teach the entire sales team how to use a script. Literally, this script had been copied and pasted from The Wolf of Wall Street. It was Jordan Belfort. Like, you might as well have just kind of scribbled his name out and put somebody else's name in. It was crazy. And this was a consultative sale, right? How can you script a consultative sale? I gave my advice at the time. It was, thanks, Dan. We appreciate your input. We're going to go from here. So I backed it up and we delivered it. Long story short, fell like crazy on the floor, right? So scripts don't work in a consultative scenario. You can tell if a salesperson is using a script. Just say the word potato and see what happens. Like, I don't know what you want me to do with this. All right. I think scripts are really good for actors, right? They're really good for comedians. Like if you look at, say, Chris Rock. Chris Rock is phenomenal. I love Chris Rock's comedy because it's so scripted, but he delivers it in a way where it seems unique every single time. But it's so perfected. That's what we want in those situations. So if you're in a sales situation where you're just saying the same thing every single time, then the script is perfect. But for many of us, we're not in that. We have to react. We have to change. We have to deal with something as it comes up from the prospect. And so actually plays are better for that. Yeah, well-drilled, rehearsed chunks of process and sales ability with the ability to flex and weave in between each scenario. Let me give you an example. So, I often talk about cold calling. And cold calling is an amazing technique. If you get good at cold calling, we'll do entire episodes on cold calling. You get good at that, the world is your oyster, okay? You don't innovate on a cold call. The cold call is the same every single time, right? You should have a well-scripted, well-drafted cold call intro, a set of questions that you would ask on every single call. And yeah, maybe the phrasing is slightly different, but really it's a controlled environment. Where you go after that, I don't know. So I'm going to teach you flexibility. So I'm going to teach you chunks of bits, but I'm going to give you the flexibility approach. So it's like stand-up comedy versus improv. And I know we're going to have comedians on the show at some point. So that's coming, and talk about the balance of those two. Both of them have their merits. Okay. So scripts are bad, plays are awesome. Get comfortable. We don't need to be perfect. Nobody actually perfect puts people off. If you're too polished, then somebody's going to say, I don't trust you as much. But if you're professional, if you sound like you've done it before, then that gives clients confidence. Okay, so overall, scripts are bad, plays are good. The last part, and this has come up, I guess, over the past couple of years as I've kind of evolved from sales training, sales enablement, now you have revenue enablement, and the kind of world is changing, is sales training, sales enablement needs to be part of the leadership conversation. It needs to have a seat at the table. So as and when sales and sales leadership is trying to figure out how to solve the challenges, raise the numbers, raise the performance, sales training, sales enablement needs to be at that table. Now, if you're in sales training and sales enablement, you've probably been banging this drum for a little while. I've got a message for you in a minute. So this is really going out to sales leaders. If you're a sales leader listening to this, then make sure your sales training and sales enablement teams are there, whether they're frontline or whether they're just there listening. Those teams need to have an opinion because they can add value to something normally isn't looked at. You'll often have in those situations sales ops, those kind of numerical things where we're looking at numbers, we're looking at pipeline, we're looking at processes, we're thinking spiffs, we're thinking incentives, we're thinking comms plans. And absolutely, if you change those mechanical things, you're going to make a massive impact on your sales performance. But good sales leaders also realize there's a people component, to changing sales behavior. And really it's sales training and sales enablement that have that focus on the people. How can we get more out of our people? They'll be closer to the skill side. They'll see things slightly different than maybe an ops person would. So Yes, have your ops leaders in the room. Yes, have your sales leaders. Yes, have your analysts. Yes, have all of those people in there, and have sales training, sales enablement, whatever you call it in your company, have them in the room. Okay, it's really difficult for that team to have an impact if you're not invited onto the field to play. Right? Going back to the American football thing, it's like you're sitting on the bench. There's only so much you can do. Okay, then we come to sales enablement now. So, team, you know who you are. You listen to this. I've said what you wanted me to say. Now, here's my challenge to you. And when I say you, I'm obviously talking to me as well as a sales training enablement professional. Is prove your value by demonstrating the return on impact and the impact you can have on numbers. Right? That is our challenge. Yes, feedback forms are amazing and everybody loves you and fab, but nobody cares. Nobody cares. If you think about Kirkpatrick, and we're just going to go into that, we'll talk about it another time. Kirkpatrick level 1, reaction, nobody cares. Level 2, did they learn something? Well, you can demonstrate it. Nobody cares. Did they change behavior? That's interesting. Right? Are they doing something different that you can track? Great. Still, gold standard is numbers. Now, I've been in this game for a little while. And do you know how many times I've got close to the numbers or all the way to the numbers? I can count it on one hand. It's a tough challenge to say, right, I can prove revenue impact, I can prove numbers impact, I can prove all of those things. But it never stops me from chasing that number, all right? So whether you get there or not, that is the challenge, the strive for every engagement that you have, get to the number. Recognize that you're not the only player. So think about factorial analysis, math friends out there. But that's what you should be chasing. You should be showing the impact on business performance, not how much people like your trainings. Okay, so rant over. So I guess 5 things that I've learned over the years of sales training. And, really the podcast for me is another opportunity to learn. Like, this has been a whole bunch of learning that I've done. I know there's so much stuff out there to learn. And so I'm hungry to learn. And so as well as being the person who's going to be asking the questions, I'm also going to be the number one listener, right, to this content, because I know there's so much to learn out there. So I'm excited to have this and to share Sales Enabled as a podcast with you. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. If you want, go over to the website, download, get access to the newsletter as well. And, I'm looking forward to hearing from you and hearing your thoughts about future episodes, and if you have any requests for people that should come onto the show as well. So that's it. Podcast episode 1 done. Thanks for being part of it. I look forward to seeing you on podcast episode number 2 very soon.
You know what I think, Ron? I think that was a sales call. Good job, buddy.
So you're going to buy a subscription?
No, I already get the Times.
Bye-bye.